Hi and welcome to the Malat cookery channel. So today I'm making Singapore noodles. So a Singapore noodles recipe has been asked a few times by subscribers to the Malat YouTube cookery channel. Just getting around to doing it now, so apologies for the delay. I've had a look at two businesses that Malat supply, two noodle bar businesses, and obviously I've taken the recipe from one of those. To be fair, they were quite different in their approach and also the ingredients that are used. May well be down to different regions of the world where the two chefs come from. The chef that I'm actually taking the recipe from is from Hong Kong. He tells me that Singapore noodles were actually invented or the recipe was developed in Hong Kong. I don't know how true that is. Should imagine Singapore noodles were developed in Singapore, but I'm going to take him as face value, so please don't shoot the messenger, but he reckons it's a Hong Kong recipe. The main difference between the two different businesses is one of the noodle bars uses a red Thai curry paste as the main flavouring for their Singapore noodles. The recipe that my family liked from the two, they use a mild Madras curry powder, which is what we're going to use from today. But I think there's so many variations of this particular recipe out there anyway. I've always struggled, I'll be honest with you, I've always struggled in the past with rice noodles or rice vermicelli to stop it from clinging together. Both chefs, and thank you very much to those chefs, both chefs have told me exactly how to treat rice noodles in order to stop them from clinging together, and obviously I'll pass that on in this video. But the basic principle is that it's made from rice. You treat rice noodles exactly the same as you would with rice. The only difference being that with rice, we wash the rice at the beginning before we actually cook the rice to get rid of the starch. Rice noodles or rice vermicelli suffer from the same starch problems, but we rinse the noodles at the end of the cooking process. So that's the two main differences. Rice, we rinse the starch off at the beginning, before the cooking process, and noodles we do at the end. There's also a couple of other tips as well, which I'll go through during the video of how to stop those noodles from clinging together. As usual, a full list of ingredients will be given at the end of the video, so let's have a look at those ingredients now and anything else we're going to need for today. So with regard to the ingredients, I'll do the sauce or the seasonings first and then the main body of the recipe second. So for the sauce, 50 millilitres of cold water, tablespoon of dry white wine, tablespoon of oyster sauce, and a tablespoon of light soy sauce, teaspoon of corn flour or potato starch, whichever one you're using, teaspoon of sugar, half a teaspoon of MSG, and a heaped teaspoon of mild Madras curry powder, and a little bit of a sort of secret ingredient that this particular noodle bar puts in their curry powder, half a teaspoon of garam masala, and that gives a really sort of fragrant flavour to their curry powder. I'm actually using Raja mild Madras curry powder, but obviously you can use whichever curry powder you like. Just bear in mind that make sure it's a really good quality, because it does have a significant bearing on the finished flavour of the dish. So the other ingredients, I've got some char siu or Chinese barbecue pork. I have done a recipe video on how to make char siu. I'll put a link in the description to that particular video in the description for this video below. Half a green pepper, which has been de-seeded and sliced, one medium free-range egg, and to that I've added a little bit of milk just to break that egg up. Got about 8 large prawns or king prawns. Now this is enough ingredients to do at least 2 adult portions of Singapore noodles. I'm going to use about 50 grams of bean sprouts. We've got half of a medium white onion which has been sliced, and 1 large spring onion which again has been sliced but into larger chunks. And for our rice noodles or rice vermicelli, going to be using 2 nests of those, so 2 blocks of rice noodles for this recipe. So the first thing to do is to blend all of our sauce ingredients together, which I've done. Just make sure that sugar, MSG and curry powder is blended in really nicely and there are no lumps from the corn flour or potato starch, whichever one you're going to use. We just want to put that to one side now. So once we've blended our sauce ingredients, the next thing to do is to cook the rice noodles. So it all depends which rice noodle that you're cooking, which brand. Always follow obviously the details on the pack. So this particular brand tells me that I need to do the rice noodles for 4 minutes. Because we're putting the rice noodles into a hot wok once they've been cooked and washed through, I'm going to reduce that time by a minute. So if it tells you to cook your rice noodles for 5 minutes, obviously reduce that time to 4 minutes. These ones say 4 minutes, so I'm going to reduce to 3. And the reason for that is we want the rice noodles to be cooked but to be just firm. Otherwise, if they're too soft and they go into a hot wok, they'll start to break up. So as I said, I'm using 2 nests. So these are the types of noodles, nice thin rice noodles or rice vermicelli as they're called as well. So I want to drop those in. As I said, I'm going to simmer these for about 3 minutes. About a minute into the cooking and I'll start to break them up. Just make sure they're nice and loose. You can see just from the colour of the water just how much starch has come off these rice noodles, but that isn't enough. I'm going to be using a sieve, pour them through the sieve and then rinse under cold water for about 30 seconds, move them around in a sieve as well, trying to get off even more starch. The more starch we get off these rice noodles, the less chance there is of the rice noodles actually just clumping up in the wok. Right, so once we've rinsed our noodles, this is not a step you necessarily need to do. What was said to me is just use a tray and place the noodles spread out onto the tray for about 10 minutes just to air dry. Turn them over after about 5 minutes and drain off any water. The drier the noodles are before they go into the wok, the better. But I saw this particular noodle bar had almost like racks with noodles drying, cooked noodles drying on these racks. So I tried it when I got home and because it worked, I'll kind of be doing this all the time now. So all I'm going to do is just place these noodles onto the wire rack and just leave them for about 10 minutes just to air dry before we attempt to cook with them. As I said, not necessarily a step you need to do, just as long as you can leave the noodles spread out on something just to dry for about 10 minutes. So once our noodles have dried sufficiently, the next thing to do is we can actually put this recipe together. So I've got a well-seasoned wok, got some oil in the bottom of that wok, just going to coat the sides and pour out any excess oil. So the only oil we've really got in the wok is what's actually covering the inside of the wok itself. The way the noodle bar puts this dish together, obviously we've got very experienced professional chefs and a lot of heat from the cookers that they use. I haven't got that heat, I certainly haven't got that skill level, so the advice I've been given is don't try and replicate what they do, cook in batches and then bring everything back together at the end of the recipe and we'll see the same results as, or very similar results as a noodle bar. What a professional noodle chef does is we'll start with one ingredient, move it to one side and then partition the wok into sections and they're cooking all different things. Clearly I just haven't got the skill level to do that. So I'm going to coat the inside of this wok, pour off any excess oil so that the recipe isn't too oily. Going to bring that up to a nice temperature where we can see the oil smoking, the first thing I'm going to do is to cook the egg. So the wok hasn't got to be too hot for this particular part, as the egg cooks quite quickly. So all I'm really trying to do with the egg is to cook it through, and I'm going to chop it into small pieces. So I've got a warm dish to one side. Just going to reserve this egg and then carry on with the other ingredients. So a little bit more oil in the pan. Same as before, just make sure that oil is nice and fluid, coating the inside of the wok, and just get rid of any excess oil. Now I want this wok to be a nice high temperature, so I want to see the oil smoking before we add anything else. So into our nice hot wok goes the onion and spring onion, as well as the green pepper. I'm just going to cook this through for a couple of minutes, just until it starts to soften. So next thing I want to add in is our barbecue pork. Just cooking that through for another minute. Obviously the barbecue pork is already cooked, so we're just warming that through. The prawns are the next thing to go in. Just want to be gentle with these prawns, and we're just looking for the prawns to change colour to a nice pink colour. Okay, again we're going to reserve this now in that warm dish. Okay, so same again, a little bit more oil in the wok, but this time we don't want to drain off as much as we did last time, just literally a little bit more of a covering in the bottom, because we want the noodles, which is the next thing to go in, we just want them to get coated with a little bit of oil. So bringing that wok up to a nice temperature. In go our noodles. And we're just going to fry these, again, just for a couple of minutes. We don't want to fry them too much, it's not like chow mein, but we want to get those noodles coated with some of that oil. Okay, so back in with our other ingredients. And it's at this stage that we want to add in the bean sprouts. So we want the bean sprouts to be cooked through, because on rare occasions they can be a source of salmonella, but we want them to remain crunchy. So it's just a case now of just mixing that through. And we just want to add in our sauce, just a little bit at a time. Again, like all the other dishes I've done recently, it all depends how much sauce you want with this particular dish. You don't want to add too much though, and you don't want it too soggy. So I'm going to see how we go with that. Maybe just a little bit more. Right, so just another couple of minutes cooking and this dish will be ready to serve. So there you go, Singapore noodles. Whether this recipe originated in Hong Kong or not, I don't care, because it's absolutely delicious. I finally got the method of working with rice noodles without it all clinging together, which I'm really pleased about. Please subscribe to the channel, and as usual, if you've enjoyed this particular video, hit the like button. Thank you very much for watching.